In today's episode, we'll share two stories that starkly illustrate how deceitful and morally corrupt bosses can be. These individuals use their power to become sexual abusers and murderers, exploiting their positions to subject their subordinates to horrific humiliations and suffering. Their actions reveal a complete lack of human decency and compassion, turning the lives of their employees into a living hell. On June 1, 2005, at 6:00 p.m., a man timidly walked into the investigation department of the Wonju police station in Gangwon province. After a moment, with his head bowed, he made a shocking confession. "I killed a person." Hearing this, the police immediately began to identify the man. He turned out to be 38-year-old Lee Yong-sok, who had no criminal record. Moreover, he held a high position in a large company. He worked as the head of the Human Resources Department at the SK Energy subsidiary, Korea Oil Pipeline Corporation, and his job was quite stable. Following his testimony, the police went to a wooded area in Yangpyeong, Gyeonggi Province, where, according to him, the murder had occurred. At 10 p.m. that same day, the body of a woman who had been strangled to death was discovered at the scene in Yangpyeong. The condition of the body was horrific. Numerous signs of beatings all over the body, blood on the face and head, and all her nails were broken. The victim's clothing stood out in particular. She was wearing thin summer clothes that had been pulled up, and her bra straps were undone. Her skirt was also pulled up, and although she was wearing underwear, it was soiled with dirt, indicating contact with the ground. Marks of severe pressure were visible on the inner thighs. The white cardigan she had been wearing was missing. Analyzing the scene, certain conclusions can be drawn. The removed outer clothing, the pulled-up underwear, and the marks on the thighs all indicate an attempted rape. It is believed that the victim fiercely resisted, which led to her nails breaking, and she was killed in the process. It was later revealed that the victim was 22-year-old Hwang, an employee of the Korea Oil Pipeline Corporation, who was subordinate to Lee Yong-sok, the man who confessed to the crime. Let's see how the events unfolded. On May 31st, Hwang stayed late at work following the instructions of her boss, Lee Yong-sok, and when public transportation was no longer running, she decided to go home in her colleague's car. Hwang got into her colleague Go's car to leave work, when her boss Lee Yong-sok began following them. After a while, Go's car stopped in front of the bus terminal in Bundong, and Lee got out of his car. He approached Hwang and said that he needed to talk to her, asking her to come with him. Hwang refused, and Go, seeing this, tried to stop Lee, pointing out that it was already too late. However, at 10:30 p.m., Lee forcibly dragged her into his SUV, which was clearly an abduction. Lee drove her to an area near the Hanwha Resort in Yangpyeong, where he brutally beat her. Hwang died from the beatings, after which Lee disposed of her body. In his confession, Lee claimed that the murder was accidental. However, his words seem strange. Lee asserted that Hwang fell asleep in the car, and then he suddenly got angry and strangled her. But this raises doubts. How could an abducted victim fall asleep? An examination of his car revealed numerous traces of blood on the front part and ceiling of the vehicle, as well as broken interior elements, indicating a struggle inside the car. It seems more logical to assume that Lee attempted to rape Hwang, and during the struggle, he killed her. Nevertheless, Lee insisted that the murder was accidental and denied any attempt of rape. Indeed, the autopsy did not reveal any traces of semen. At the time of the investigation, the Wonju police fully trusted Lee's testimony. The police completely accepted the statements of Lee and Go, despite numerous signs of sexual violence. Why did this happen? The fact is that from the very beginning, the police considered that Lee and Hwang were in an intimate relationship and therefore assumed that there was no forced sexual act. This assumption was supported by Go's testimony, who stated that Hwang had shared with him her troubles about dating her boss Lee and planning to end the relationship. However, subsequent checks showed that Go's words were not supported by any evidence. On the contrary, the deeper the investigation went, the more evidence emerged that Huang had been subjected to constant sexual harassment and stalking by Li. Despite this, the police, at the early stages of the investigation, trusted the words of Li and Go without proper verification. Huang's relatives, especially her mother Yu, were categorically opposed to this version. Yu claimed that her daughter had never been in a relationship with Li. Now let's learn a little more about Huang. After receiving a recommendation from her professor, she got a job at the stable state-owned company Korea Oil Pipeline Corporation, which made her family very happy. However, her joy did not last long. In August 2004, Huang was suddenly transferred from the department where she worked to the Human Resources Department, where Li was the boss. At first, Li was very kind to her, often giving her a ride home in his car. However, he had been married twice and had children from both marriages, a 12-year-old daughter from his first marriage and a 7-month-old daughter from his second marriage with a company employee. Despite this, Li began to show obvious signs of attention to Huang, and then harassment. Despite having a family, Li began approaching Huang under the guise of friendliness and then openly courting her. He even told her, "I will divorce my wife, let's date and get married." Huang refused, which enraged Li. He began to threaten her, saying, "Do you know who I am in this company? With one word, I can get you fired." This was outright bullying. Li continued to harass Huang more and more. Huang left a record of what was happening on her Psyworld page, where she wrote in her diary, "Life has become unbearable. Someone, help me." Shortly after this, she was killed by Li. This is an incredibly tragic story. A young, talented girl was murdered by her boss for refusing to enter into a relationship with him. For her family, this situation was unbearable. Not only was their daughter unjustly killed, but the police also claimed that it happened because of a romantic relationship with a married man. Huang's family filed a complaint with the prosecutor's office about the improper conduct of the investigation. The subsequent investigation confirmed that Huang was not in an intimate relationship with Li. Questions also arose about the police because Li initially went to the Wonju police station in Gangwon province, which was not related to the crime scene. This case had no connection to the office in Bundang, where the abduction took place, or to Yangpyeong, where the murder occurred. So why did Li decide to confess to the murder at the Wonju police station? The Wonju police station took on the case and continued the investigation, which was unusual because typically the case is handed over to the jurisdiction where the crime occurred. Suspicion also arises from how Li decided to surrender. The day after the murder, on May 31st, neither Li nor Huang showed up for work. Concerned colleague Go reported to the company that he had seen Huang being taken away by Li the previous night. The Korea Oil Pipeline Corporation reacted very quickly, and the next day, June 1st, fired Li. This coincides with the time when Li went to the police to surrender. The confession was made around 6 p.m., and Huang's body was found at 10:30 p.m. If the dismissal occurred before the confession, or before the body was discovered, it raises even more questions. The company might have known about the incident in advance and took measures to protect its reputation. It is more logical to assume that the company knew about the murder in advance and directed Li to surrender at a police station where they might have had connections. The Korea Oil Pipeline Corporation has a branch in Wonju, which might explain the choice of the police station for the confession. This raises suspicions among Huang's relatives that the company and the Wonju police might have been connected and acted to minimize damage to the company's reputation by covering up workplace harassment. Initially, the company announced Li's dismissal, but 3 days later they changed their decision, allowing him to resign voluntarily. This allowed Li to avoid losing his severance pay. When asked why the decision was changed, the company responded that Li had done a lot for the company. In November 2005, a trial was held, and Li was sentenced to 15 years in prison. This sentence seemed low for murder, and the reason was the exclusion of the attempted rape charge. The court only recognized that the murder was accidental during a quarrel. Later, at an appellate court, Li's sentence was reduced to 12 years. Additionally, colleague Go, who falsely testified that Huang and Lee were in a relationship, was fined 1 million won. Investigator Choi, who handled the case, admitted his mistakes in the investigation process after the trial. He said that he misunderstood the term intimate relationship and simply made a mistake at the time of the investigation. During the trial, Lee's lawyers tried to prove that Huang and Lee were indeed in an intimate relationship by presenting a letter allegedly written by Huang. The letter, presented as evidence, resembled a love note, supposedly confirming their romantic relationship. However, Huang's mother, Yu, immediately stated that it was not her daughter's handwriting. She hired a handwriting expert at her own expense. The analysis results were shocking. The handwriting in the letter matched Lee's handwriting. Yu immediately forwarded these results to the prosecutor's office, which then contacted the National Forensic Service for confirmation. The analysis confirmed that the letter was forged. It turned out that the work the investigators should have done was actually carried out by Huang's mother. This is outrageous, as Lee not only killed Huang but also forged a document, which should have increased his punishment. Nevertheless, Lee was sentenced to 12 years in prison and has already been released. Korea Oil Pipeline Corporation never issued an official apology. 8 years after the tragedy, they offered Huang's family compensation of 100 million won, on the condition that the family would not file any further lawsuits and would not disclose information about the agreement. Yu rejected this offer and continues to fight for justice, revealing the truth about her daughter's death. She even bought Lee's car at auction, the one in which Huang was abducted, and keeps it in anticipation of a possible retrial. Yu transformed from an ordinary housewife into a justice fighter, striving to clear her daughter's name and ensure that those responsible are punished. In the face of ongoing concealment and falsification of facts, Huang's mother strives for one thing: that the company offers a sincere apology and that the case is reviewed without any doubts, so that the guilty are properly punished. Although Lee has already served his sentence, for the mother, it remains a difficult and lonely battle. The question arises: who benefited from portraying Huang as a lover? She was a victim of sexual harassment and workplace bullying. In an attempt to distort the essence of the case and mask the truth, those who benefited from this remain in the shadows and are possibly satisfied that they managed to avoid responsibility. On January 4, 2021, a petition was posted on the Cheonghwa-dae petition board that captured the public's attention. In brief, it requested help to ensure fair punishment for those responsible for a murder. The petition's author is the younger brother of the deceased, An. His brother, Kim, was found dead on Christmas night, December 25, 2020. According to the younger brother, this was clearly a case of murder, but the perpetrators refused to acknowledge their guilt. On December 25, 2020, a call was made to the 119 rescue service in Gimhae, Gyeongsangnam-do. When rescuers arrived at the scene, they found a private ambulance already parked there, with a man performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. However, the 119 rescuers noticed something was wrong. The position of the body clearly indicated that the man was already dead. Rigor mortis had already set in. In such a situation, performing CPR was pointless. The person who called 119 and was performing CPR was Pak, a 42-year-old head of a private emergency service. As a professional in emergency assistance, Pak could not have failed to recognize that the person was already dead, as rigor mortis typically begins 2 to 6 hours after death. Nevertheless, he continued performing CPR. The very fact of calling 119 was unusual. If the patient had been alive, he should have been taken directly to the hospital. The most shocking aspect was the condition of the body. The victim's skin was so damaged that it was peeled off in places. There were severe bruises on the face and body, suggesting possible torture. The skin on the face was also torn. This clearly indicated death resulting from a beating. The rescuer approached Pak, who was performing CPR, and asked what had happened. Pak replied that he had a minor conflict with the deceased, during which he had kicked him in the legs several times, leading to this outcome. It turned out that the deceased, Kim, was a 42-year-old colleague of Pak, also working in the private rescue service. The body was urgently taken to the hospital, where it was determined that the cause of death was multiple injuries and externally induced shock. This meant that the numerous injuries caused shock, which led to death. The victim experienced extreme pain at the moment of death. The police, having taken on the case, began an investigation into Pak. Testimonies were also obtained from employees of the same company. During the investigation, it was revealed that 2 days before his death, on December 23rd, Kim had gone on a call to a hospital in Masan and had a minor car accident. To resolve the incident, he contacted the insurance company, which angered Pak the next day, December 24th. Pak learned about it around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and was not angry because of the accident, but because Kim reported it to the insurance company. Pak began shouting at Kim, saying, "Why did you report it? We could have settled this without them." At that moment, one of the employees secretly recorded a video showing Kim on his knees in front of Pak, listening to the insults. Pak continued, "People like you should die. You are worthless," and resumed the beating. The beating continued until 6 in the evening. During the beating, Kim hit the edge of the table and lost consciousness. Then Pak, likely concerned that other employees might notice, hurriedly sent them home. Sometime later, one of the employees received a video on their phone, sent by Pak. In the video, Kim repeatedly apologizes, saying, "I was wrong. I was wrong." Pak sent this video to reassure the employees, adding that Kim was fine. The next morning, one of the employees, as usual, was getting ready for work, but received an unexpected message from Pak, instructing not to come to the office. This seemed suspicious. At the same time, CCTV cameras recorded strange actions by Pak. On the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, around 10 o'clock, Pak got into a private ambulance parked near the office and headed to the nearest gas station. When the ambulance doors opened, a group of people emerged, including Kim, who was lying unconscious. Also in the vehicle were Pak, a 30-year-old man named C, and a 30-year-old woman, the department head named Lee. They discussed something briefly and then continued their journey. About 25 minutes later, the ambulance was spotted at a restaurant that Pak managed with a friend. The three individuals exited the vehicle and entered the restaurant, leaving Kim inside. Despite Kim's critical condition, instead of taking him to a hospital, they went to have a meal. In the restaurant, Pak called another employee and casually informed them that Kim was dead. Even more shockingly, Pak, laughing, said, "Hey, if I go to prison, I'll have to quit smoking." These words elicited laughter from his wife and the department head. They all laughed together with Pak. After leaving the restaurant, the group went to Kim's residence, where they removed the CCTV cameras. It was strange that there were cameras in his residence in the first place. It turned out that Kim's living conditions were dreadful, dilapidated, and neglected. After joining Pak's company, Kim was forced to live there on Pak's orders. Originally, it was a place where Pak kept his Doberman hunting dogs. Kim was practically forced to live there under the pretext of taking care of the dogs. The CCTV cameras, ostensibly installed to monitor the dogs, were actually used to surveil Kim. For example, if Kim didn't leave for work on time, he would be immediately punished. Initially, Kim did not live there alone. There was another employee with him who, unable to withstand Pak's pressure, fled in July 2020. According to employees, this was not the first instance of Pak beating Kim. Despite being peers, Pak always dominated and used violence. It was discovered that Pak had been convicted 8 times for violence and was known for his intimidating behavior, which made everyone fear him. One might wonder why Kim did not simply quit the company where he was constantly beaten and confined. The reason for this was financial dependence. Pak forced Kim to cover the costs of repairing the vehicles he drove. These amounts were exorbitantly high, and Kim could not pay them immediately. As a result, he had to borrow money from Pak, leading to debt accumulation. Pak used these debts as leverage to keep Kim in subjugation, threatening him and his family. Kim was a paramedic, frequently driving the ambulance. During his work, the vehicles occasionally needed repairs, such as when a stone hit the windshield, causing a crack. In such cases, Pak unjustifiably demanded that Kim pay for the repairs. Kim could not pay the required sums immediately and had to borrow money from Pak, which led to debts. These debts were deducted from Kim's salary, with significant amounts being taken each month, ranging from tens to 150,000 won. As a result, Kim received only about 50,000 won in hand, which was absolutely insufficient for living. Kim constantly faced financial difficulties and often skipped meals. At the same time, Pak continued to subject him to physical and verbal abuse. Kim had attempted to escape several times, but each time Pak showed him the debt note and threatened to harm his family if he tried to leave. Consequently, Kim returned to avoid putting his loved ones at risk. On the day of the incident, according to the police, Pak began beating Kim around 1 o'clock in the afternoon on December 24th and continued for 12 hours. At some point, Pak even ordered chicken to eat while continuing to torment Kim. In the room were 3 women: Pak's wife, the department head, and the company cook. They witnessed the beating but did not intervene, later claiming that they were afraid of Pak and could not oppose him. Press reports mentioned that these women, except for the wife, were Pak's mistresses. This case is indeed shocking. The violence continued until 1 in the morning on December 25th, eventually causing Kim to lose consciousness from severe pain. During the investigation, it was discovered that Pak had posted a job advertisement on a recruitment site at this time, seeking new employees capable of long-term work and getting along well with colleagues. This is astonishing, considering he had just beaten a person. Pak was initially arrested on charges of involuntary manslaughter, which outraged the victim's family, who insisted on murder charges. The difference between these charges lies in the presence or absence of intent to kill. It is evident that 12 hours of continuous beating can be considered an intentional act aimed at causing death. In January 2021, the prosecution added the charge of murder, and Pak was arrested and brought to trial. Pak's wife and the 2 other women present at the crime scene were charged but not detained. In July of the same year, Pak was found guilty and sentenced to 18 years in prison, along with 10 years of electronic monitoring. Pak appealed, claiming he did not use dangerous objects during the beating and had no intention of killing. He also tried to accuse Kim of lying and not fulfilling his duties. However, the court did not accept these arguments, and the initial verdict was upheld. The Supreme Court ultimately sentenced Pak to 18 years in prison. According to his relatives, Kim was a strong and healthy individual before he started working for the private emergency service managed by Pak. He was a former senior sergeant in the Navy who had served faithfully for 5 years. However, after beginning work under Pak, Kim's condition deteriorated sharply, and by the time of his death, he was unrecognizable even to his close ones. During this period, Kim completely fell under Pak's control and influence. Experts suggest that even a strong adult can become a victim of gaslighting, especially when subjected to constant abuse. In such situations, a person loses the ability to critically assess what is happening and becomes dependent on the aggressor. A video recorded shortly before Kim's death shows Pak brutally beating him. Kim appears confused and lifeless, constantly apologizing, repeating, "I'm sorry." This clearly shows the state Kim was in before his death. This story is so incredible that it's hard to believe it's real. Can a person really fall victim to gaslighting to such an extent that it leads to their death? It raises doubts, but cases of workplace violence and pressure are unfortunately not uncommon. Such a perverted hierarchical culture, where power is used to suppress and humiliate employees, is one of the most heinous forms of abuse. Why do those who bully others forget that their victims are also someone's children, parents, and loved ones? I hope Kim finds peace and no longer has to apologize for his actions. Such a perverted hierarchical culture, where power is used to suppress and humiliate employees, is one of the most heinous forms of abuse. Why do those who bully others forget that their victims are also someone's children, parents, and loved ones? If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and see you in the next episodes.